Hello, BizFair attendees. My name is Jeff Levy, and I'm very glad to chat with you today about franchising. Let me give you some agenda items so we know what to expect in our talk today. So the agenda will include an understanding of what franchising is as a business model. We'll talk about different categories of franchising and the kind of age and education of people that go into franchising. I want to make sure you really understand what a franchise is and isn't by definition. I'll talk about the components that go into a franchise investment. They're typically in three categories, and you need to understand them and understand what other representations that a franchisor might make. I'll talk about types of franchises, because there are definitely different categories, and making the right choice has a lot to do with thinking about your relationship to the business. We'll spend some time on the franchisor disclosure agreement, which is a federally and state mandated document that is available to you. And then I'll talk about next steps, how someone might proceed with a better understanding of how to evaluate a franchise for their own particular needs. So what is a franchise? Let's talk about that first. And I think sometimes there's misperceptions. When you enter into a franchise agreement, you are licensing a trademark or a trade name for something that has been already developed and most likely in the market with several franchisees, maybe hundreds possibly. A franchise is a proven system. So when you evaluate a franchise, you're actually looking for the kind of results that you're trying to achieve in your life, both financially, work-life balance, et cetera. Franchises provide significant training and ongoing support, although not all franchises are created equally, but you'll be able to get a good sense of what the training and support is within a particular franchise. For someone who wants to start a business but isn't sure what kind of business to do, maybe hasn't come up with a great idea, evaluating franchise options might help you get that spark so that you still can be in your own business. You do build up equity in a franchise. It's a bit of a misperception sometimes, but franchises can be sold. I have been coaching people in this category for 20 years, and a number of the people that I put in franchises back 10, 15 years ago are now selling their businesses successfully. There are royalties and there are fees associated with a franchise. I will talk about that a little bit later. Sometimes that scares people, but I try to remind them that when you are starting a business, you are making investments in all kinds of resources. And sometimes you can make the wrong investment because you don't have a history, where a franchise system is telling you what are the appropriate investments to make. There's also regulatory oversight in franchises. And what that means is that both on the federal and state level, franchise documents are reviewed. If you happen to be in Washington State, we are a registration state, which means every year the franchise offering is reviewed for accuracy. And our state is has very high standards for that, and you should feel good if you are considering a franchise in the state of Washington. Territories are clearly defined, so you know your area for work. It's probably a topic to have some more discussion on, because territories are normally determined depending on the nature of the business. And franchise agreements are normally for a term of 10 years. For a company to be considered a legal franchise and have to go through the documentation requirements, if they have a royalty, if they have a term of the agreement, and if they have a franchise fee. So you will always find that franchise agreements are for a specific term. Good news is, in our beautiful state of Washington, if you're in compliance with the agreement, you have a sole right to renew that franchise. You also can sell the franchise if you chose to. People sometimes think of franchising as fast food because that's what we see on the street. That's the McDonald's and the Burger Kings, et cetera. In my work with clients over the last 20 years, I think 4 or 5 people have gone into food businesses. I can't necessarily explain that to you, although I think food sometimes requires a sort of 7-day-a-week mindset. You have to deal with perishable things. So a lot of the folks I work with tend to look at business to consumer type of franchises. But you can see from this slide that there is a wide distribution. There's approximately 4,000 franchise models, and they cover 80 different industries. So there's quite a wide variety and choice of options when you're trying to understand the nature of a business you might learn about and consider participating in. And in a franchise, you are in business for yourself, not by yourself. And I want to take a moment to explain that because I think it's an important comment. The idea of a franchise is that you are following best practices outlined by the franchisor, but you also have set up your own legal entity. You set up your own corporation. And when you have your own corporation, you can, of course, pay yourself what the company can support, your franchise can support. You can set up retirement plans and defer income. You get tax advantage of having your own company, but you also have the guardrails and support and structure of a larger organization that you can work within. So you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And I hadn't mentioned earlier, but I am a franchisee myself. And one of the things that I thoroughly enjoy is being able to work with colleagues who deal with some of the similar things every day that I do. And I want to make sure that I'm doing the right things. In terms of who becomes franchisees, so there's definitely an education and generational perspective. I think as you're hearing me today, you might think, well, I'm in this generation or that generation. This is a change that's in flux. Many of our franchise candidates do tend to be in the baby boomer generation. Part of it is that they are subject to age discrimination in their work. And when that happens, they might find themselves at 50 to 60 years old. They may find that they've got resources, they've got energy, they've got skills, and yet they sort of age out of the corporate system. The area of the Gen X, that younger couple, people in their 40s, that's a changing dynamic in that I think these folks have sort of grown up understanding that careers that last 30 or 40 years in corporate America really don't exist today. And therefore, you may want to be looking at some other things that will be more under your control, and a franchise fits in that category. From an education perspective, people that go into franchises are educated. Almost half of them have bachelor's degree, and a quarter of them have master's degrees. When you go into a franchise, they provide you a system that you have to follow, but I think you have to have good work habits. You have to have a good handle on your particular skill set, and those are things that are very important when you're evaluating a franchise. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the financial side. It's on everybody's mind when you consider a franchise. There are three components that everyone must consider. And the first is the franchise fee. All franchises have that. Sometimes they are discounted if you're a veteran, or sometimes they're multiplied but discounted if you're looking at several territories. But they all have a franchise fee, and that gives you the right to use that system for a period of time. Usually it's 10 years. But again, in Washington State, you have the sole right to renew. The second part of the total investment are the capital items you need to run the business. So, for example, if you're running a residential cleaning service, you might need vans, you might need mops and other items that are part of the package to deliver the service. You might need a washing machine. You certainly need a computer and related things to that. So there's a capital investment that's put in the business and that's the second part of the total investment number, then every business has an operating capital expense. Now, operating capital is, when you've paid your franchise fee, when you've set up the business and it's ready to do commerce, what does it cost every month literally to keep the doors open? So is there rent? Is there lease on equipment, lease on computers, et cetera, monthly insurance payments that are spread out over the year? That's your operating expense. So when you project your sales and your gross margin, your profit on those sales, then anything you do above the operating expense is hopefully your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that's how businesses are sort of managed. But the franchisor will do a great job of telling you, of course, what the franchise fee is, what equipment you need to run the business, and what your normal range of operating capital should be. So when you have that information, you can more accurately predict what your sales might be, again, based on the history of the franchise, and therefore what kind of earnings the business can provide for you. From your own ability to finance the business, there are several things that you need to keep in mind and you need to be thoughtful of. The first is liquidity. Now, when a franchise looks at liquidity means that you can literally write a check out or do a direct deposit out of some funds that are not illiquid. In other words, they're not tied up in real estate or a certificate of deposit, for example. So liquidity is fundamentally important. Let me get that on the screen. Liquidity also is important because you have to pay a franchise fee, you probably have to pay for some training fees, and you need to meet your personal obligations. What does it cost you to run your house, meet your obligations through liquidity while the business is getting built up and hopefully starting to generate profits? The other thing a franchisor will want to know, and certainly you want to know as well, is what is your ability to borrow money? As I will talk about today, there are franchises in a number of categories with different levels of investment. But normally when someone gets up into the $100,000 or $150,000 range or more, or even lower than that, they are looking to do some borrowing. So getting educated around that is important. There are several companies today that specialize in franchise financing. They'll actually do free pre-qualifications. And so it's just an important part of your education is to understand what your ability is to borrow. Secondly, a FICO score. You always want to make sure that you have a good credit score. And if you're not familiar, FICO is it's called Fair Isaac Credit Organization. There are several others that may be used, but ideally you want a credit score in the low 700s or higher. And the reason for that is it actually will impact your ability to get reasonable interest rates. If there's an SBA loan, et cetera, they're going to look at your FICO score, and that can be a benefit if it's managed correctly. The other thing that's important is net worth. So all franchises will have a number that they feel is an appropriate net worth. And net worth, of course, is all your assets less your liabilities. It's a theoretical number because you don't liquidate everything you own. You don't pay off all your debts. But net worth basically says what your financial strength is, your capability, your ability to weather challenges as they may come up. So franchisors will likely ask you your net worth and ask you to complete a net worth statement. I would normally tell people that your net worth, and net worth includes your home, 401k, value of a car. It has even your furniture in your home. If your net worth is under $100,000, it's probably going to limit some of the franchisors that you would consider. But if it's over 100, over 150,000, the range of potential franchises gets greater. And I put this in just to be helpful to you as well. This is a company that used to be based in Bellevue. They're now virtual. And that link will actually allow you to do a pre-qualification, again, with no commitment, and you're actually never sharing traceable personal information, no account numbers, et cetera. So if you wanted to get some pre-qualification done about what you might be able to borrow, that's a good resource. So when someone looks at a franchise, of course you want to understand, who is the franchisor? What is their history? What is their culture? When you talk to franchisees, are they open and candid about information? But every franchise must provide a disclosure document called the franchise disclosure document. And that's not a sales piece. That is a document that is specifically designed to have the franchisor give you things that they're standing behind at significant penalties if they're not accurate. And I'd like to just cover over a few of the items in this. So it tells you who runs and who owns the franchise. Really important. You want to know what these people are, what their background are, what their business experience is. If an owner has had a bankruptcy in the past, it's typically disclosed. You want to put your money with someone who you believe in. If there's any litigation, and we live in a world where companies can sue franchisees can sue the head corporate group, they have to disclose that stuff. So if it's a group that likes to fight with people, you'll know it and you'll see it before you go further. If there are any bankruptcies in that system, they have to disclose it to you. Again, really important. Now, some of the more mundane but important things, so for example, the franchise fee very clearly will be stated. If there's other fees that you are required to pay, so for example, you may have a brand building fund or a technology support fund. And again, I don't want you to be scared about those fees, because if you were running your own independent business, you would be paying for similar services in some other fashion. And the efficiency of a franchise tends to keep fees lower. In my business, my franchise business, I pay $150 a month for a technical support fee for my computer and other systems. I couldn't get that in the open market for anywhere near that. The initial investment is what I talked about, is that property, plant, and equipment. So you have a very clear understanding of what it's going to cost you to get into that business. And franchisors will actually give you low, medium, and high, the range. And so part of your research will be looking in your market and comparing labor costs and facilities costs and cost of acquiring a vehicle, et cetera. So you can see if you could put that business together within the guidelines that they're providing. They, of course, restrict some of the products and services you might do because they want to protect the brand. Franchisees' obligations relates to your financial obligations. When are you going, what are you going to, when do you have to pay certain fees, et cetera. If they provide financing, that's listed in their FDD. Most franchisors do not, but we all have access to some very good financing resources today that are very interested in this category. Item 11 is their obligations to you. So the franchisor will likely say, we are going to have a web page, we're going to support you with a conference, we're going to do ongoing training every week, et cetera. Those are things that are laid out. Your territory. Very important thing to understand. Different businesses will have different strategies for their territory, but you will not be surprised after you sign your franchise agreement. This is a disclosed item. Okay. Moving on, trademarks, patents, they're all laid out for you. Item 15 is important because here's where a lot of the pre-work needs to be done. You need to be thinking of the relationship that you want to have with the business. And so the franchisor will tell you, is this a part-time gig where you will work in it part-time and have a manager run the business, or is it something that they expect you to do full-time? Item 16 is sort of self-explanatory, to protect the brand. Item 17, however, is important. If you plan on renewing, if you plan on quitting, they call it termination. If you want to sell the business, if you have a dispute to resolve, it's all laid out in advance how they look at those things and what are the rules that they expect everybody to play within. Public figures is self-explanatory. If there is someone who is a public figure involved in the franchise, they'll let you know. And people really look at item 19. That is the one place where about 30% of the franchisors actually provide a financial information other than revenue for their franchisees. Now, we can always get to that information, but more and more franchisors are providing it. And it's not salesy. It can't be like, join us and you'll make a ton of money. It has to be historically documented financial claims. Item 20 gives you the names and phone numbers of every franchisee in their system and people that have left in the last year. Again, tremendous resource. Don't run out and start calling them. Talk to someone who's familiar with franchising. Feel free to talk to me. I'd be happy to give you some thoughts before you start calling franchise outlets. Item 21 happens to be the audited financial statements of the franchisor. And again, the reason that's important is you want to make sure that they are a financially solvent company. I think you will find that franchisors' finances have improved dramatically because there's been a lot of private equity that has come into buying franchise systems and bundling them together. Any contracts that you might have to sign as a franchisee is included, and a receipt. The receipt is something that when you get the document, you should sign it. It provides no obligation, but it does free you to sign a franchise agreement when you are ready, because there's a 14-day cooling off period that starts when you receive that document. Moving forward, everybody ends up signing a franchise agreement, which is typically 2 or 3 pages. It refers to the FDD, so you do need to read the FDD or have an attorney read it. These are the items that these are part of the FDD, but they're pulled out because they are considered the most important elements. Okay. So how does someone find a good franchise? And this is, I think, part of why I give this talk today. First of all, before you even think of the business, and a lot of people spend time on the internet trying to look at franchises, and they might see something that's a shiny object, and they say, wouldn't that be cool? You really have to start with your own personal income, lifestyle, wealth, and equity goals. What's the result that you're looking for? You have to plan on, at least in my view, 2 to 6 months of education, probably a month of just talking about your vision, your goals, your needs, talking about your transferable skills, maybe doing some assessments. There's some profiling that can be done that's considered to be helpful to the franchisors. And then the validation process, and that is talking to enough people in the franchise, those are successful and maybe those that have been challenged, to make sure that you understand what a day in the life looks like to be in that business. And you select the business and then go into their training program and schedule opening, et cetera. So those are just at a high level, some of the things that are important. So I think a lot of people give up on their dreams too early. And the belief that I have, and this is one of the data points that I have shared in other presentations, is that 50% of people 50 years and older will most likely lose their job and not recover economically. And so people think and have the dream about, what if I own my own business? What if I control my own destiny? What if I control my own fate? How would that be? And then they wait around for a light bulb to go off and an idea to come in. And unfortunately, we don't always get those great ideas. So if you take an inventory of your gifts, your skills, your dreams, that is a good foundation for evaluating different franchise models that can relate to your dreams. And again, plan on taking 2 to 6 months to go through that process. And people always ask me, well, how long does it take to get profitable in a business? Well, one of the things that I do make sure they understand is getting profitable means breaking that cash flow, that monthly break-even cash flow number. It doesn't mean returning the debt that you put into the business. That might take a longer period of time, but feel comfortable that in evaluating any franchise model, you have the ability to clearly understand what the normal range of time it takes to get to cash flow break even, to get to a point where perhaps the business is working for you, and what the potential income might be out of that business, and as well what the potential exit plans might be. So on the next slide, I provided some of my contact information, which I understand is okay in the seminar. Feel free to reach out to me. If I could help you, I would be glad to do. It would be my pleasure. And it's always great to be part of the SBA SCORE and their initiatives to help small businesses. Thank you.